This is the story of James, a man whose life was turned upside down by a simple request that no one saw coming, a request for a paternity test. What started as a question about his son, Ethan, unraveled a chain of shocking revelations that shattered his family and his trust. James, a husband and father, thought he knew the people closest to him, but the truth proved far more complicated and painful than he could have imagined. This is his journey through betrayal, lies, and heartbreak as he seeks to uncover the hidden truths about his children, his wife, and the woman he once called family. James narrates that it was a quiet Saturday afternoon. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when Mia walked into the room. She looked off. There was something in her eyes, something heavy. I didn't think much of it at first, maybe she was just stressed. We had 2 kids, and life was always moving fast. But then she dropped a bombshell on me that left me frozen in place. I think we need a paternity test. I couldn't even respond at first. I just stared at her. What? She sighed and sat down beside me, clearly avoiding eye contact. Her hands fidgeted in her lap, as if she were trying to gather the strength to say something she knew would break me. Ethan, I think he might not be yours. Ethan, our 6-year-old son, the one I'd raised from the moment he was born. He had my eyes, my smile, my everything. How could she say that? But then, as the words slowly sunk in, a knot began to form in my stomach. Mia was serious. I tried to make sense of it. Are you saying that Ethan isn't my son? I repeated, still struggling to wrap my mind around the idea. She nodded but didn't say anything more for a long time. The silence between us felt like an eternity. My brain was racing. This couldn't be real. I didn't even know how to process it. You're asking me to get a paternity test for my own son? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but the anger and confusion were clear. She nodded again, her eyes filled with an expression I couldn't quite read. I just think we need to be sure for all of us. I noticed some things, his behavior, things that didn't make sense. I thought maybe it's nothing, but now I can't ignore it anymore. I sat there, stunned, my mind spinning. The thought of Ethan not being my son was a nightmare I didn't even want to entertain. It didn't make sense. I had been there for every step of his life. I held him when he was born. I taught him how to ride a bike, and I cheered at every school play. Ethan was my world. But Mia, she looked different now. She wasn't the woman I thought I knew. She looked guilty, distant. But before I could say anything, she added something that took my breath away. I think you should get one for Lily too. Lily, our 2-year-old daughter. She was so young, so innocent. The thought that she might not be mine felt like a gut punch. Mia was suggesting that both of our kids were not mine. I couldn't comprehend it. I sat there in silence, trying to process what she had just said. Why? Why would you even suggest that? Mia looked down at her hands, her voice barely a whisper. I know this is hard to hear, but there's something about Lily. She looks too much like Claire. It's not just the looks, it's everything. The way she behaves around her, the way she seems to connect with her. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I think we need to know the truth. The truth. The truth. It was like a weight crushing my chest. Claire, Mia's younger sister, had always been close to us, always around. I never thought twice about it, she was family. But now Mia was suggesting that Claire had something to do with all of this. I was completely blindsided. Are you saying that Claire might be involved? I asked, barely able to get the words out. Mia nodded slowly. I don't want to believe it, but something doesn't sit right with me anymore. We need to know. I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, betrayal, anger, confusion, but most of all, fear. Fear that the life I had built, the life I thought was perfect, was all a lie. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew I had to find the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Okay, I said, my voice shaky. We'll do it. But this isn't over, Mia. You have to tell me everything. I left the conversation feeling like I was walking through a fog. Every moment we'd shared, every smile, every hug, felt like a lie now. As I sat in the silence of our house, I tried to hold it together. I had no idea where this path would take me, but I couldn't escape it. The truth had been set in motion, and there was no turning back. The request for a paternity test had been made, but something inside me told me this was just the beginning. The idea that my children might not be mine was almost too much to bear, but there was a deeper feeling in my gut that told me there was more to this than just a simple test. I couldn't ignore the doubt creeping into my mind. Mia had dropped this bombshell, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't know everything. There were pieces missing, and I had to uncover the truth. I started by observing Mia more closely. In the days following her revelation, she seemed distant. It wasn't just about the test anymore, it was about something deeper, something that had been hidden for years. She had always been a loving mother, but now I saw a side of her that was anxious, almost paranoid. She kept fidgeting with her phone, making excuses to leave the house, and avoiding direct eye contact. Every time I tried to bring up the situation, she would change the subject. It was as though she was trying to push the whole thing aside, but the guilt in her eyes was undeniable. I knew I had to find out more about Claire. For years she had been like a sister to me, and I had never questioned her role in our family. But Mia's words haunted me now. Lily looked too much like her. Could it be that Mia was telling the truth, or was there something more sinister going on behind closed doors? I decided to start by looking into Claire's past. She had always been a bit of a mystery. I didn't know much about her relationships beyond the occasional mention of a failed romance or a brief job change. But now, with Mia's cryptic warning, I needed to dig deeper. I went through old family photos, things that had been tucked away in boxes in the attic. I scrutinized every image of Mia, Claire, and the kids. There was something unsettling about the way Lily's eyes seemed to match Claire's in every photo, the way they both smiled the same way, as if they were one and the same person. It wasn't just the physical resemblance, it was the way they carried themselves. The more I looked, the more I began to question everything. The tipping point came when I overheard a conversation between Mia and Claire. I wasn't supposed to be eavesdropping, but their voices floated up from the kitchen one evening when I was upstairs. I could hear the strain in Mia's voice as she asked Claire for advice about the paternity test, but Claire's response was chilling. "I told you it would come to this," Claire said, her voice low. "You should have told him earlier. Now, he'll never forgive you." Mia's voice cracked as she pleaded, "I didn't want this. I never wanted it to come out like this. I was hoping it would stay buried forever." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I had to know more. What was Mia hiding? Why had she waited so long to tell me? And why was Claire so involved in this secret? I decided to confront Claire. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I had to get answers. The conversation at the cafe was the first time I had truly questioned her. She had been evasive, but there was more beneath the surface. The guilt on her face when I asked about Ethan and Lily couldn't be ignored. I pushed her again, urging her to tell me the truth. Claire hesitated, then finally spoke in a whisper. "You don't know what you're asking, James. You have no idea what Mia's been carrying all these years." The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. What had Mia been hiding? And how was Claire involved in all of this? I left the cafe feeling more confused than ever. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I was getting closer to the truth, and the closer I got, the darker it seemed. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The paternity test results arrived, and everything I thought I knew about my life came crashing down. The tests were conclusive. Ethan wasn't my biological son. My heart dropped to my stomach as the words on the paper burned in my hands. It felt like a punch in the gut. I had raised him, loved him, cared for him, but he wasn't mine. I couldn't breathe. How could this be true? There had to be a mistake, a mix-up in the lab. I dialed Mia's number, my hands trembling, and asked her to come home immediately. The house felt cold and empty. like a void where my world had once been. Mia arrived quickly, her face pale and drawn, as though she already knew what I was going to say. "Mia," I said, trying to hold it together, "the test results, Ethan, he's not mine." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, James. I never wanted you to find out this way. But I couldn't just let it go. How could you hide this from me? All these years you let me believe he was my son. What happened?" Mia's voice shook as she explained. She confessed to an affair that had taken place years ago, during a rough patch in our marriage. It wasn't just a brief fling, it was a full-blown relationship. She had slept with someone else, and the result was Ethan. She said it was a mistake, a moment of weakness, and that she had tried to move on. She didn't want to ruin our family, so she buried it deep inside, convinced that it would never come to light. But it wasn't just Ethan. Mia continued to explain that Lily's paternity was also in question. She couldn't keep the lie going any longer. Lily too might not be mine. The thought sent another wave of nausea through me. How could this happen? How could Mia let it go on for so long? Her voice cracked as she told me about Claire. It turned out that the affair had involved Claire's ex-husband, and after their divorce, Claire had been trying to make sure the truth came out. Mia had always feared that Claire would reveal the secret, but somehow she had managed to keep it hidden. "The truth is, Ethan and Lily," Mia sobbed, "they're not yours. They're his." For the second time, my world shattered. Mia's confession was like a knife to my chest. But there was more. Mia told me that Claire had known from the beginning that she had been involved in hiding the truth. It wasn't just a one-off affair, it was a tangled web of lies. Claire had been watching, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal everything. She had known about Ethan's paternity for years and had kept the secret for her sister for her own reasons. I stood there, numb, as the truth finally settled in. Mia's affair with Claire's ex-husband had set off a chain of events that would change everything. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, had been living a lie for years. And the worst part was, I hadn't even seen it coming. The pain was unbearable. And yet, I still didn't know everything. There was more to this story, more that I had yet to uncover. The days after Mia's confession were a blur, a haze of disbelief and sorrow that clouded my every thought. She had told me everything: Ethan's and Lily's paternity, her affair with Claire's ex-husband, the twisted web of lies that had been spun for years, but somehow I still couldn't absorb it. The depth of the betrayal was suffocating. I had loved Mia with all my heart. I had trusted her, believed in her. And now, everything was a lie. But as the days wore on, the anger began to take hold. I could barely look at her without feeling a rush of resentment and hurt. Mia, once the woman I thought I knew inside and out, was now a stranger to me. How could she have hidden something so monumental for so long? How could she have let me raise children who weren't even mine? It wasn't just Mia I was angry with. Claire, her sister, the woman I had welcomed into my home as part of the family, had known the truth all along. She had watched me raise Ethan and Lily, knowing they weren't mine, knowing I was living a lie. I had trusted her, confided in her, and now it felt like a cruel joke. She had been in on it, complicit in this betrayal. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Claire's actions weren't just the result of a mistake or a lapse in judgment. This was deliberate. She had known about the affair from the beginning, had watched Mia struggle with the secret, and had allowed it to continue. It was as though she had been waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the truth, to destroy everything I held dear. I couldn't let it go. I needed answers from Claire. I needed to know why she had let this happen, why she had kept the secret, and what her role in all of this really was. I reached out to her, demanding to meet, but she wasn't eager to face me. When we finally sat down, the tension between us was palpable. Claire was defensive, almost angry, as though I was the one who had wronged her. She kept insisting that Mia was the one who had made the decisions, that it wasn't her fault. "You don't understand," Claire said. her voice rising. I didn't want to hurt you, James, but you didn't know the truth. You never saw what was really going on behind closed doors. I couldn't believe my ears. You're telling me you were okay with this? You were okay with watching me raise kids that weren't mine, watching me love them as my own? I was shaking now, my voice low but full of fury. She didn't respond. Instead, she looked away, unable to meet my eyes. The guilt was written all over her face. Finally, after a long silence, she spoke again. "You're right," she whispered. "I should have told you. But Mia, she was my sister. I couldn't betray her. I couldn't be the one to ruin her life, to destroy everything. But I wasn't buying it. You already ruined everything, Claire. You and Mia both." I stood up, the anger building within me, and for the first time, I realized how much this had changed me. The man I had been, the man who trusted without question, who believed in his family, was gone. In his place was someone shattered, someone who could never look at the people he once loved the same way again. "I don't want anything to do with either of you anymore," I said, my voice cold. "You've both made your choices, and I'll make mine." As time passed, I struggled to put the pieces of my life back together. The fallout from Mia's confession had been catastrophic. Our marriage was over, and I had lost my trust in everyone I once held dear. I couldn't look at Ethan or Lily the same way anymore. They were still my children, but the love I had for them now felt tainted, clouded by the knowledge that they weren't mine. It was a painful truth, but it was one I had to accept. Mia and I barely spoke. The guilt and shame weighed heavily on her, and while I didn't have much sympathy left for her, I could see the remorse in her eyes. She tried to explain herself, to justify her actions, but it was too late. There was no going back from the damage that had been done. I couldn't forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Claire, on the other hand, disappeared from our lives completely. She stopped visiting, stopped calling. It was as though she had vanished, leaving nothing behind but a trail of broken promises and betrayal. I never saw her again after that fateful conversation. But I would soon learn that there was more to her silence than I had realized. Months later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Claire, and it was the last thing I ever expected. The letter contained an apology, but it wasn't just any apology. It was a confession. She admitted that Mia had not been the only one involved in the affair. Claire herself had been a part of it, and Ethan and Lily were both the result of her actions as much as Mia's. She had known from the start that the children weren't mine, but she had kept the secret, not out of loyalty to Mia, but because of her own twisted need for control. The letter sent my world spinning once again. I had been living with the belief that Mia had kept everything from me, but in reality, Claire had been just as guilty. She had been complicit in the lie, a silent partner in the destruction of everything I had known. As I read the final words of the letter, I realized that the truth was far more complicated than I had ever imagined. There was no easy resolution to the pain and betrayal I had experienced. Mia and Claire had both wronged me in ways I couldn't begin to understand, and now they were both gone from my life. But the children, Ethan and Lily, were still there, still my responsibility. They needed me, and despite everything, I knew I had to be there for them. They deserved the truth, even if it was a painful one. And while I couldn't change the past, I could try to build something new with them, something based on honesty and understanding. The final revelation came with a harsh, undeniable truth. Sometimes the people we trust the most can hurt us in ways we can't even fathom. And in the end, the only thing that really matters is how we choose to move forward.